You are standing in the corridors of the Great Palace of Constantinople. The year is 1025 AD. The marble beneath your feet glows like cold moonlight, and the air hums with incense and fear. The gold mosaics shimmer on every wall, scenes of saints, angels, and emperors, but their eyes, if you look closely, never seem to meet yours. They are turned slightly away, as if unwilling to witness what these halls conceal, because if these walls could speak, they would whisper stories that would make your blood turn to ice. Stories of women whose names have been erased, whose bodies were owned, traded, and discarded as though they were objects. Stories of a world that built its glory on the suffering of the unseen. The Byzantine Empire. We remember it as a beacon of civilization, a jewel of the medieval world. The last breath of Rome, crowned in gold and drenched in faith. But behind those shimmering domes and marble palaces, another reality existed, one so disturbing that even chroniclers of the time struggled to record it. It was a world where female slaves were stripped not only of freedom, but of identity itself. Before we continue, if you find value in uncovering the forgotten truths of history, the kind that never made it into school books, take a moment to subscribe. It helps this channel bring more of these stories back to light. Now, let's begin with the foundation of their horror: the law. Under Byzantine law, a female slave had no juridical existence. She was not recognized as a legal person, only as property. She could not own anything, not even the rags that covered her. She could not sign a contract or defend herself in court. She could not testify, could not marry, could not sue or be sued. If her master chose to beat her to death, the law saw no crime, because the law saw no person. She was as legally significant as a chair, a cow, or a broken lamp. Her value existed only in the price someone might pay for her. This legal erasure wasn't an accident of history. It was deliberate design. It ensured that every woman enslaved in Byzantium was invisible. And invisibility meant impunity. A master's absolute control was sanctioned by law. His right to punish, to sell, to exploit, even to destroy his property. The system didn't just permit cruelty, it demanded it. For the empire to function, women like her had to remain voiceless. In the eyes of the law, their suffering did not exist. And in that silence, unspeakable things became routine. The empire's wealth glittered above ground, but beneath it lay a system built on broken bodies. And this was only the beginning, because once the law reduced a woman to an object, the next step was to use her as one. In the chambers behind these marble walls, the trade in flesh would become an industry, a dark machine that turned innocence into currency and suffering into profit. The law had already taken their freedom, but the markets took what was left of their humanity. In the crowded quarters of Constantinople, trade moved like a heartbeat. Spices, silks, and people all measured, priced, and exchanged. Among merchants and sailors, there was one truth none dared to speak aloud. The most sought-after captives were women, and youth made them more valuable still. This practice had become woven into the empire's fabric. What began as conquest and servitude evolved into quiet exploitation, so normalized that even those who condemned it in public often benefited from it in private. Behind the language of faith and law, there existed a hidden economy, one that thrived on vulnerability. Many of the captives were taken during wars, raids, or times of famine. Others were children sold by desperate families who believed servitude offered survival. Once inside the empire's trade routes, they were treated as property, recorded, inspected, and redistributed. Their conditioning began early. Historical records speak of training houses where captives were taught how to serve and obey. drilled in gestures of grace, silence, and submission. To the chroniclers, it was discipline. To those inside, it was the slow erasure of self. They learned to speak when spoken to hide emotion behind a calm expression, and to believe that endurance was their only safety. Over time, obedience became instinct. The person disappeared, leaving behind only what was useful. By the time a young woman was deemed ready for service, she no longer remembered what it meant to act from her own will. Smiles became rehearsed. Tears became private. Her world was a performance written by others. Trade records from the Byzantine era reveal the scale of this system. Ledgers describe people in columns and sums, their worth calculated with the same precision as goods or livestock. Markets operated with bureaucratic order, each sale taxed, each transfer logged. The empire found profit even in its cruelty. Networks stretched across seas and mountains. Caravans and ships brought captives from the Balkans, Anatolia, and distant northern steppes. Some were brought through deception, others through war. Each route led to the same destination, the great markets of the capital, where human lives were exchanged beneath polished arches. For those within the system, survival meant silence. Any show of resistance could bring punishment, sometimes disappearance. Families were torn apart, their names forgotten, their stories buried beneath empire and ritual. This was not the chaos of crime, but the order of commerce, an institution sustained by faith, law, and power. And behind the golden icons of Hagia Sophia, amid the hymns that promised salvation, another truth remained unspoken. The empire's splendor had been built upon unseen suffering, a quiet trade that shaped its glory and shadowed its soul. The Byzantine Empire inherited the cruelty of Rome and refined it into law. For female slaves, justice was not protection. It was punishment. Under Byzantine jurisprudence, a slave woman's testimony was worthless unless extracted through torture. The logic was simple. She was not fully human, so her words could not be trusted unless her body was broken. It did not matter that torture produced lies. What mattered was control, the public display of submission. Legal documents from Constantinople described torture as if it were administrative routine. Iron clamps, heated rods, suspension by the arms. For female slaves, sexual violence was often part of the interrogation process. The goal was not truth. It was to remind them that their suffering sustained the order of the empire. Even outside the courts, pain governed every aspect of their lives. A master could whip, mutilate, or kill his slave without consequence. The law viewed this as destruction of property, no different from breaking a vessel or killing livestock. A slave's death had no legal weight. Her life had no value beyond the service she provided. Public punishment was a spectacle. Crowds gathered to watch women flogged, branded, or executed. The purpose was deterrence, to remind the poor, the conquered, and the enslaved of their place. Byzantine chroniclers recorded these events with chilling neutrality, as if describing theater. The city treated agony as entertainment. In private households, the violence continued quietly. Female slaves formed the backbone of domestic labor, working from before dawn until long after nightfall. They cooked, cleaned, laundered, and tended to their masters' children. They slept on bare floors near the thresholds of their owners' rooms, always available, never off duty. Their exhaustion was viewed as laziness, their mistakes as moral failings. Letters and diaries from Byzantine nobles describe their servants as drunken, clumsy, idle. The masters blamed character instead of cruelty. Beatings followed every perceived act of defiance. Too slow to rise, too weak to lift, too ill to work. Some punishments were designed to humiliate. Denied food, forced to labor while ill, stripped before other servants. Every act reinforced the hierarchy. One class born to command, another to endure. In smaller homes, the cruelty intensified. With fewer servants, each woman carried the full burden of the household. She prepared meals, fetched water, washed clothes, tended children, and served her master personally. Even illness offered no reprieve. To falter was to invite violence, and the boundaries between labor and violation did not exist. In the Byzantine mind, a female slave's body was another tool of service. Her duties included whatever her master desired, whether in the kitchen, the courtyard, or the bedchamber. Many households used eunuchs to oversee these women, victims themselves, mutilated to serve as enforcers. Their own suffering often hardened them. They became the empire's most efficient instruments of discipline, punishing the enslaved women they supervised with merciless precision. This was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was the machinery of obedience. The empire relied on submission, not from loyalty, but from terror. Every blow, every command, every sleepless night reinforced the same truth. Their pain kept Byzantium alive. The markets of Constantinople never slept. Beneath silk awnings and marble arches, the empire's hunger for bodies was endless. Merchants arrived from every direction. Crimea, the Balkans, the Caucasus, the Levant, they brought men for the army, boys for the workshops, and women for the houses of the wealthy. The city's slave market near the harbor of Constantinople was a theater of human despair. Buyers walked between rows of captives, examining their teeth, their hands, their scars. Slaves were priced like livestock, their value determined by youth, beauty, or skill. A healthy young woman cost more than a soldier. A virgin could fetch the price of a ship. Even children were commodities. Byzantine notaries recorded sales of girls as young as 7, sold for service or for upbringing, as if care could erase the transaction. The empire's bureaucracy preserved every sale in meticulous detail. Names, ages, and prices, the arithmetic of ownership. Yet not all slavery was born from conquest. Poverty alone could deliver a woman into bondage. Debt, famine, or widowhood often forced families to sell daughters into servitude to survive, a desperate choice that became a life sentence. The church condemned greed, but not ownership. Bishops and monasteries themselves held hundreds of slaves, arguing that the institution could be holy if the master acted with mercy. They baptized the enslaved, gave them Christian names, and still demanded their unpaid labor. Faith became another chain, gilded, sanctified, and eternal. The empire's collapse did not end their suffering. When the Ottomans took Constantinople in 1453, the conquerors inherited a city already accustomed to slavery. The names of the masters changed, but the system remained. Byzantine women who had once served Greek or Armenian households were now absorbed into Ottoman harems, their Christian prayers replaced by silence. Some adapted, learning new tongues and faiths. Others disappeared, absorbed into the great machinery of empire, remembered only as numbers in trade ledgers. Even centuries later, echoes of their servitude lingered in the stories told by peasants and pilgrims. The old word doulos, slave, survived in folk songs and idioms. It became a metaphor for suffering itself. Freedom, for them, was not a legal decree. It was the faintest rumor, something spoken about, never experienced. Most women born in bondage died in the same condition, their children inheriting both their labor and their invisibility. Generations turned in silence beneath the empire's weight, forgotten by the chroniclers who praised emperors and saints. And yet, in small traces, a broken comb found near a monastery wall, a name scratched on a clay shard, a prayer sewn into a garment. Their existence endures. These fragments whisper what the official histories refuse to see: that Byzantium's beauty was built upon the backs of the broken. The mosaics, the cathedrals, the golden icons, all gleamed because unseen women scrubbed their floors, washed their robes, and endured their masters. Every empire decorates its cruelty with art. Byzantium was no different, and when its walls finally fell, nothing remained of the empire's splendor. Only the same silence that had followed those women all their lives. The silence of those who served, suffered, and vanished. The silence that outlived an empire.